Welcome back. We are back for following up on our marriage GPS. Hopefully you guys have had a really good time being able to kind of describe your problem in one sentence. One sentence. Not a paragraph, not an essay, not a diatribe, but if you had to break the problem down into one clear sentence, and we gave an example last week, and we left it at there, and we were going to pick right up because we said we want to give you a really good tool to getting through not just the problems that can be solved in one request, but these are the ones that look like they've been sticking around a while. Is that a good way of saying it?
Yeah, the gridlock problems, the problems that
in
are
that family. Yep.
Like, you know how when you're in gridlock traffic, you try to go this way, you can't. You try to go that way, you can't. You try to go. It's just you keep getting stuck.
Yeah, gridlock is a nickname I got from my Gottman training, and gridlock is those kinds of problems that Dr. Gottman described as saying it's like being in a roach motel. Remember, different generation, the old ad was roaches check in, but they don't check out. That there's certain types of conflicts or topics that in your marriage, when you go into them, you just don't get out. The conflict never stops or it's those kinds of things that just keep coming up again and again, and you're getting more and more frustrated. And those are the ones we're kind of really more talking about for our GPS.
Right.
And after that first step of defining the problem clearly.
In one sentence.
In one sentence.
And you have a great example for us.
Oh, well, there's an example that when you think about the problems that the early church had, the Bible has some really good examples of very clearly stated problems. If you read all the New Testament letters, it was all a matter of them trying to deal with issues, right? They would praise, they were grateful, they were thankful, and talk about God and the Spirit and Jesus. But then they had to really deal with problems, and the apostles and the early writers had a great way of describing things that at least dealt with the actual issues quickly. In Acts chapter 6, this is a great example of a one sentence problem. It says, in those days, when the number of disciples were increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food.
Period.
What do you see?
It was clear. What was the problem? The Hebraic Jews and the Hellenic Jews, they had a problem. One was being overlooked in the distribution of food. That's it. You know what the problem is right away.
Right. Or specifically those widows.
The widows.
They had like a benevolent program. You were enrolled in that program as a widow, and guess what? That ethnic group was being overlooked, which brought up some, ethnic tensions, amongst Greek speaking, non-Greek speaking, and that was pretty intense, and it got rough. And they came up with some solutions, but they were able to come up with a solution because
the problem was clearly stated and defined, and they knew what they were talking about.
Absolutely. So first step in the GPS is being able to define the problem clearly. So once you've done that, so you define the problem clearly, and it's a problem that's sticking around, right? It's sticking around. You tried stuff before. What do we do next? We're in that position where first, like in a GPS, it tells you where you are, right? You tell it where you want to go. Okay. That's the reason you get it to solve the problem. This is where we want to go.
Right.
But also it kind of gives you feedback on where you are. That's like sort of phase 2.
Where am I right
Where
now?
are we right now, right?
And so that's one of the lists we're going to be sharing today.
Two lists.
We have two, but that's one. That's the first of the lists we're going to be sharing. What have we done, each of us, not just me, to contribute to the problem?
Absolutely. If you had to have a good, and this is all before you finally dive into to dealing with it.
This is an assessment.
You got to make 2 lists.
Right.
The first list, and this is you. How have I contributed to the problem?
So let's say we've defined our problem as we can't agree financially on what is too much and too little spending for the two of us. We keep arguing about it. Oh no, you spend too much. No, you spend too much. No, you spend too much. No, I think you spend too much. So that's the problem. We defined it in one sentence. That's it. Now, I've got to think about how have I contributed to the problem.
Yeah, right.
So
which is not easy.
I would say, because I feel like you put me on a tight leash, I will go behind your back and just buy stuff and do things.
So that's one thing you would write. Yeah, I haven't helped this problem because I'm going behind his back.
I'm going behind his back and spending money anyway because I don't agree with the tight budget you put me on. Using
that example, mine could be something like, and it was, to be honest, we're being a little open here in the past. It would be something like, I get really anxious, and so I start, giving all these rules about what we can't spend. And that gets her exasperated. That's something I've done to contribute. I end up taking any extra income that my wife makes, which frustrates her. So that doesn't help her, because I feel like I got to catch up on the budget, right? Things like that.
That's it. We'll just keep, and I'll think about too, how I work an extra job. I do. I say, okay, I'm going to got a budget. So now I'm going to work an extra job and get this extra money. And the way I've contributed to the chaos is I went and said, don't direct deposit it. I want a check in my hand so I could cash it and not have to tell you that I had the money so it don't go into the pot.
How did that contribute to the problem?
Because I started pulling out and being selfish. This is mine. This is mine.
Yeah, and then of course, then it goes back to like, oh, there's no money. There's no money.
And then you get frustrated.
And I'll give up on the right. So,
and then we're back on this cycle.
Yeah, that list is tough to make. Here's why. Usually when a problem like that, you have a problem in your marriage that you really feel irritated about, you got it defined, but you feel like, man, you really kind of feel the blame is on your spouse. It takes a very sober and responsible view and say, look, what have I contributed to this? And be able to say it. Usually when there's a problem like that that's been around for a while, there's always something both have contributed to the problem.
If it's gridlock. Because gridlock is not on one side. It's a problem that's big enough that either I do something and you respond, or you do something and I respond, and we're on that cycle.
Absolutely.
That going round and round. Now, we can sit and laugh about it now. But in the middle of that,
it's rough.
We wanted to duke it out.
Yep.
We had to get the gloves. And so you've got to be gentle with each other. So if you say, this is what, it's a hot issue, and you're saying what you did, I can't be sitting there like, yup, and you did too. What about that? Write that down on your list. So we've got to be very...
You got to be gracious to each other.
As you're trying to solve this problem.
Right. But first you want to write it down. So you write those two things. And the second list is you want to, and this is still something you do individually, you want to write down what attempts have you as a couple made to try and fix it or try and resolve it that haven't worked.
Right.
So it'd be like, oh, we sat down and talked about it for hours. Or... we brought it up with another couple.
We did.
And it still didn't get resolved.
We made the budget.
We made a budget and it still didn't get resolved. Right? Like, so just listing the things that as a couple you've contributed, and then...
What are some of the things you've tried?
Right. Some of the things you've tried as a couple to try and resolve it already. That's important. Why is that important? Both of those steps.
Because as you was talking, I thought about the definition of insanity, right? So what do they say? Insanity is you have this problem and you keep trying the same thing over and over again, and it's getting nowhere. But then you talk about it again and you try the same thing over and over and over again. So it's good to make these two specific lists. What have I done? So I know what I need to stop because I've contributed to the problem. And then what have we done as a couple that we need to stop because it's not getting us anywhere? Because then you can move, because this is where you are, right?
That's
is the
where
way
we
you
are. That's where things are.
And so in order to move forward, we can't do
We know what we're not going to do.
We know what we're not going to do.
There we go.
And then we
Awesome.
could do some research for what are we going to do. But first we got to say, what have we been doing? That ain't working.
There we go. There we go. And look, let me give you an encouragement. Try making your lists. If you've got a problem that you and your spouse have been trouble getting through, start with those 2 lists. You still haven't talked to your spouse yet. These are still things that you're reflecting on. And we'll meet each other again for our final part of getting problems solved in your marriage.
Yes.
And this has been